attention. Most scientific investigations can't live up to the demands of media packaging. At least for the science of child development, there have been no eureka moments that fit the classic characterization of a major scientific breakthrough. Rather than being the work of a single scholar, the new ideas have been hashed out by many scholars, sometimes dozens, who have been conducting research at universities the world over. Rather than new truths arriving on the wings of a single experiment, they have come at a crawl, over a decade, from various studies replicating and refining prior ones. The result is that many important ideas have been right under our noses building up over the last decade. As a society, collectively, we never recognized they were the real thing. NurtureShock. Introduction. Why our instincts about children can be so off the mark. My wife has great taste in art, with one exception. In the guest bedroom of our house hangs an acrylic still life, a pot of red geraniums beside an ochre-toned watering can with a brown picket fence in the background. It's ugly, but that's not its worst sin. My real problem is that it's from a paint-by-numbers kit. Every time I look at it, I want to sneak it out of the house and dump it in the corner trash can. My wife won't let me, though, because it was painted way back in 1961 by her great-grandmother. I am all for hanging on to things for sentimental reasons, and our house is full of her family's artifacts, but I just don't think this painting contains or conveys any genuine sentiment. There was probably a hint of it the day her great-grandmother bought the paint-by-numbers kit at the craft store, a glimmer of a more creative, inspired life. But the finished product, in my opinion, kind of insults that hope. Rather than commemorating her memory, it diminishes it. Painting by numbers skyrocketed to success in the early 1950s. It was hugely popular, the iPod of its time. It was marketed on the premise that homemakers were going to have a vast surplus of free time thanks to dishwashers, vacuum cleaners, and washing machines. In 3 years, the Palmer Paint Company sold over 12 million kits. As popular as the phenomenon was, it was also always surrounded by controversy. Critics were torn between the democratic ideal of letting everyone express themselves and the robotic, conformist way that expression was actually being manifested. The other day, I was trying to remember how I felt about the science of child development before Ashley Merryman and I began this book several years ago, when all of a sudden that painting of potted geraniums popped into my head. I had to go home and stare at that ugly painting for an evening before I could figure out why, which I ultimately realized was this. The mix of feelings engendered by paint by numbers is similar to the mix of feelings engendered by books about the science of children. This is because the science has always carried with it the connotation that parenting should be by the book. If the science says X, you're supposed to do X, just like paint by numbers instructed hobbyists to use corn silk and burnt umber for the handle of the watering can. So if a few years ago someone had told me, "You really ought to read this book about the new science of kids," I would have politely thanked him and then completely ignored his recommendation. Like most parents, my wife and I bought a few baby books when our son was born. After the first year, we put them away until, 3 years later, when our daughter was born and the books once again graced our shelves. Until our daughter turned 1. After that, we no longer had any interest in the books. Most of our friends felt the same way. We agreed that we didn't parent by the book, nor did we want to. We parented on instinct. We were madly in love with our children, and we were careful observers of their needs and development. That seemed enough. At that same time, Ashley and I had been co-writing columns for Time magazine. Living in Los Angeles, Ashley had spent years running a small tutoring program for inner-city children. She has been something like a fairy godmother to about 40 kids, a constant presence in their lives from kindergarten through high school. Guided by her instincts, Ashley has had no shortage of ideas about how to steer the kids in her program.